Okay, welcome everyone to our Get to Know the New Jersey Shade Tree Federation. And tonight we're here with Pam,
Hi.
Who is Vice President. My name is Liz, I'm President. And then we have two of our board members tonight, and they are both professors at Rutgers University. And they are also avid speakers. So you might have seen them speak before, you probably know their names, you've probably seen them around. And Jason was also past president of the Federation. So welcome, Jason and Frank. And Jason, do you want to start and just introduce what you're doing now and what you do at Rutgers?
Sure. I'm Jason. Hello, everybody. Jason Grabosky. I work at Rutgers University in the Urban Forestry program. I'm coming to you live from my basement, where I have not left for most of the past year. When I'm on campus, I'm on Waller Hall. I do classes in tree care, in urban forestry. My research is pretty broadly defined to things that have to do with trees, and more often than not, something to do with the built environment. I do a little bit of cooperative extension work as well. And I guess I'm one of the campus tree geeks.
Great.
So Frank, how about you?
Hey folks, my name is Frank Gallagher. I'm with the Department of Landscape Architecture at Rutgers, where I head the environmental planning program. And I had a little longer route to get to Rutgers. I spent 30 years or so with the Division of Parks and Forestry, where I ended up as the assistant director of the division. And then I came over to Rutgers about 10 years ago. And so you might say I'm what the Lenape would call a Misha Walker between two worlds. I've got some practical experience. And in the last 10 years, I've been totally in the academic world. And to tell you the truth, it's this combination of bringing science back to our planning and our design work that is the focus of what I do.
Great. So we have a ton. I mean, if you just see this experience on the board, they're good board meetings, to say the least. Very educational. Pam, do you want to start with the first question?
I do. So I also wanted to point out, Jason is my boss. So the first question I want to ask.
The cat's running away from that.
Like, I'm getting out of here. First question I want to ask is, can I have tomorrow?
What was that again? I missed.
Oh man, that was my joke. It didn't land. I figured if I asked for tomorrow off in front of all these virtual people, you couldn't say no. So my first question was, can I have tomorrow off? But that's not really my first question. Liz will edit out the joke.
He's not going to answer.
So
that's a no.
Jason, what's a typical day like for you in your role as a campus tree geek?
My typical day. Seriously, it's usually starting early in the morning before a lot of people get on campus and get started, so that I can get some uninterrupted time. Normally by 10-ish, I'm either talking with colleagues or I'm talking with students. Spend maybe an hour and a half or so on the phone with somebody at some point during the day, or several somebodies in the aggregate. A bit of email work, and on a really good day I get outside, and on an excellent day I get to do attack some of my research. We have a lot of different students and a lot of different programs. And recently I was heavily involved with the honors program, so the undergraduate load was from a lot of different areas. Nowadays I'm kind of narrowing my focus, so hopefully I can spend a little bit more time on writing and doing a little bit more research.
So like long days.
Music, lots of loud music in the office is what I try to do.
I can attest to that. It's always very good music as well.
Yes.
That depends.
Great.
How about you, Frank? What's a typical day
Well,
like for you?
I have both teaching and research responsibilities like most people at the college. My teaching involves a heavy load of environmental design work, which comes through the Department of Landscape Architecture. And I teach a practice studio as well as an intro to environmental design. And what I find really fascinating about those types of studio courses is that the students have the freedom to really come up with new solutions to some of the critical issues that we face. And so that's kind of exciting because they do think outside the box. In my straight lecture work, it's usually in the classes of ecological history or environmental issues. And so those classes I get to actually keep up to date, or I have to keep up to date, or the students will let me know that I'm not up to date. And so that's kind of really still exciting to me. And like Jason, I do get a chance every once in a while to still get out in the woods and get full of ticks, which we thoroughly enjoy. Plug a few trees with a core bore and see how the trees are growing, and take some measurements of how the leaves are growing. And my work has been, like Jason, in the urban areas, and I've done a lot of work on what's known as novel ecology, where mix of new species from the old world, really, and species from the new world kind of mixed together in these novel assemblages that are really productive. And I enjoy getting out and seeing how the new natural world really works.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Frank is more progressive than me because, well, no, his students, I think, are much more unabashed about their use of digital media, because a lot of them are very media centric to begin with. I'm still very disturbed in classrooms when I see that they're on their media because they're fact checking the professor as the professor is delivering the lecture.
Yeah.
And again, I think that teaching has changed a lot since I was a student, Frank. I don't know about you.
Yeah, and it's worse since it's online, because they've got a couple of screens open and they're Googling things you say as you're saying it.
Yes.
So it's instantaneous. So if you're not up on the facts of the day, they'll get you for it.
Oh yeah, they'll eat you alive.
Yeah.
I've got the chew marks.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, this next question kind of ties in. So Frank, I was kind of interested because you do landscape design, which is very important in urban forestry.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the Federation doesn't always reach into that field of landscape designers. And I'm wondering, what is your favorite tree resource, or where do you direct the students to for the tree parts of their designs?
Well, it's a interesting question, because there are a lot of traditional arboricultural literature that you can use to actually inform your design work. And I think that is, so you have a staple there, right? And you have a foundation that's very strong. And so we know what species are appropriate for what type of conditions. But what I think is kind of really interesting today is this idea that these new type of assemblages, and because the climate is changing so rapidly, and the species that we're seeing today, are moving north so quickly, that we try to take our planning and our design students and say, okay, if the climate does warm by 2 degrees, if the rainfall does change by 3 degrees, if you go to the USDA sort of regional charts and planting zones, what happens when you shift them north? And what happens to the assemblages that come up? So in today's world, we still have the staples to go by. You still have the foundation, but you also have this idea that what will happen in the next 50 years is not what happened in the last 50 years. Mm. And in these new assemblages, there isn't a textbook that will tell you what to do. So how are you going to plan for that? And how do you think ahead and say, okay, maybe if I start something with this assemblage, but in my planning, I allow for that to change over time, not in the traditional successional mode that we've seen, but rather into something that's totally different. Will that still be okay with the design? Will that still be okay with our plans? And can we incorporate that into making our city sustainable?
Yeah, important. Jason, how about you? Do you have even though you're old school, do you have a tree resource or something that you kind of go to all the time or send the students to? Or
Oh yeah, there's quite a few different ones. I'd like to bounce off of Frank, because I think it's important, and it's the two things that I think that we're playing with more and more is rephrasing these design questions for functions rather than for totem species. If we know that the species may change, trying to get the design to address function and fitness is something that I think that we play with in the dendrology class, in particular when we're teaching kids about plant material. I tend to go to half a dozen different USDA websites as some resource material when I'm trying to say, you know, the species that you want, so look up its natural history and what grows with it. We call that Silvix. And so there's a large Silvix manual that's available for free online. And the fire effects program also has a searchable database on species. And so I tend to like those. Beyond that, there's a book by Heitschuh that I really enjoy. It's a rather expensive book at about $180, but it has design matrix and lists so a student can search by, say, soil acidity, alkalinity, or wet dry site, and they can see lists and then look where those plants occur. And you know, like Frank, when we pose that question, very often we have a rather stable group of species in New Jersey. Things will change, but there's going to be a lot of things that will remain appropriate, but we may be changing the lineage or the provenance of some of them for their adaptation to a warmer climate. But it's not necessarily the case that we'll see major changes in the look, but maybe we'll see some changes in our sourcing.
Sure. I like what Jason just said. I'm working right now with a species of pine, red pine, trying to do some aging of the structure of the remaining stands of red pine here in New Jersey. And the truth is, it's at the extreme southern edge of its range. And the truth is that even when we tried to replant it about 10 years ago, you know, it crapped out pretty quick. So this is changing, but what's coming in to take its place is white pine, which is native throughout the region and functions very much the same. So this idea that the functionality that Jason mentioned is as important as the structure or the species selection is I think the direction we're headed in.
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, for those who like to play baseball, when I went to Fenway Park, you root for the laundry. You don't root for the players wearing the laundry. In our case, the laundry is ecological function. And yes, we have our preferences for the players, but we can't let our nostalgia for the past get in the way of our pragmatism for the future.
Okay.
And we can never root for the Boston Red Sox.
Oh, yes, we can. Yes, we can.
No, we can't.
Okay. Next question. Jason, we'll start with you. What is your biggest tree pet peeve?
That we plant them too deep, even when we know better, or that we mulch them when we know we shouldn't. When I say mulch them, I mean burying the trunk. I like mulch. I just don't like mulch against the trunk. Good thing is it keeps a lot of people in business replacing trees prematurely and having to deal with maintenance issues. But we know better and we should do better.
What's your favorite color mulch?
Purple. I like a light brown.
And for anyone watching, do not use colored mulch, just in case you don't know, we're joking.
No, but if
Frank,
some of the mushrooms, it may turn pretty colors in your.
Oh, there you go.
So, I'm like, I'll go after Leopold's statement on this question, Um, I like all trees, right? But I'm in love with pines, so I plant pines, that's so my biggest beef about trees is this concept that there's supposed to be a specific tree that will satisfy all needs in one place. And that you can't, have a little bit of variety and that, oh no, this is supposed to go here and that's supposed to go there. And those are typologies that we've constructed out of some, mythological past that never really existed. And so again, I would go back to what Jason said, that the function works and let's play with what will work. And the function is important. Let's play what will work.
What do you like about pines?
What I like about pines, they don't lose well, most of them don't lose their needles. They're rough out the winter. They're tough.
Yeah.
Nice.
I guess as a follow-up to that, because one of our questions is, what is your favorite tree? But I guess for urban settings, what would be a tree that is, I guess like the popular one now, or something that you would recommend planting in our urban cities?
You must have Lars. He's simply wonderful.
Oh, geez.
You take this one, Frank. I can't yet.
I can't do it. Well, it's interesting. I'm almost tempted to say that my favorite tree for the urban setting is Alanthus, simply because it was on the cover of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, right?
Mm.
But I guess if I did that, most people would not join this organization whatsoever. So I actually like for streets. I actually like the Kentucky coffee tree or one of the things that don't give you all that deep shade, but give you that sort of light that kind of filters through the canyons of the city. So for that type of situation, I would do something along those lines. In a park, I think anything goes, and park settings, I think should be really diverse and have that mix of conifers as well as deciduous trees and create those spaces that allow the light to create, a place for people to experience the environment. So in those cases, walking through a grove of birch that have multiple stems is kind of a really interesting experience, or looking at a line of pines that creates an alley that you can actually take people through an experience with is something that I look for.
Yeah, that design aspect is really important that I don't think we think about a lot with urban plantings. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Jason, are you ready to answer?
Oh, I thought I could dodge. Darn.
You can. You can pass.
There's only two of you to keep track of, so.
Yeah, I know. I tried sitting at the back of the classroom. My favorite tree is the one that lives. I'm recalling my Alanthus story. I was in the south of Germany inspecting an arboretum where they were looking for trees to recommend for climate change. And they were getting ready to go to print recommending Alanthus. And I said, based on our experience, you really don't want to do that. And the response was striking. They said, well, we look at it as the Harry Potter tree. It's the one that actually lives. And so when we start talking about good plant, bad plant, sometimes we have to think about the frame of reference of the person having that discussion. And that really can color how we approach our conversations with people, particularly if we don't agree with them. And so, so I get really nervous about favorite trees or good tree, bad tree lists. But I do think that I tend to like seeing hackberry once they're a bit older on street sides. I'm not sure particularly how well they do in or around pavement, but that can be a strikingly beautiful tree in a community landscape on a roadside. But I'm going to piggyback on Frank. Urban sites can be really difficult. And so what I would do is pick really durable trees for my really difficult spots. And where I have my parks, my better places, plant anything but those and really mix it up so that you can build your diversity where it makes sense that you can manage for diversity. And certain spaces, you may be really limited in what lives as a Harry Potter tree.
Great answers.
Well,
Liz, do you think?
we're professionals. Don't try this at home.
Obviously, right.
We are home.
Yeah.
So, Liz, do you think maybe we do like a last question?
Sure.
And if what I want to do
You can ask.
is my favorite on the last question, right? Like, so we talked about what's your favorite tree, but now I want to ask, what's your favorite tree? Not species, but individual tree.
Like if you met them on the street, what's
an actual tree that is important to you? I guess
Pam, do you mean like if they like a tree that's in their mind that when they think about like a specific tree,
like an individual
that has
like
a
for me,
location?
you know, when you and I talked about it, I remembered the Metasequoia.
Yeah.
On Passion Puddle.
Right.
Right. Like that, I think is a really cool tree, like that individual. So like the tree outside in your yard, or like just an individual tree that I mean, I feel like a lot of us are attached to specific trees. And I think that's an interesting twist on the what's your favorite.
Okay. And you want to do it now?
It might be that I'm the only one that thinks that's interesting, but
No, you're not the only weird one here. There are plenty of weird people here. But I think you would have to put that into context because, you know, you have a favorite place that you call your own as a child, right? Growing up. And so, you know, for me, if I go down into Bayonne Park, I grew up in Bayonne. If I go down to Bayonne Park at the bottom of the steps going down towards the waterfront, there were big stone steps. And there were these two big old, actually crabapple trees, right? And so sitting up in those as a kid was always the thing that I remember as being home. That was my sense of sort of ecological identity as a young kid. So I think if you go back, of course, you have those. And then if you think about what you did as sort of an adult, there's trees at Liberty State Park that we planted in the 1980s with some students there. And they were pines, by the way, that are still hold a special place because of course, I remember, you know, kids coming back to the park with their kids saying, hey, when I was your age, I planted those trees, you know? And so that gives you sort of that sense, hey, you started something here that gave ownership to other people. And then, you know, more recently, I planted a Japanese red leaf maple. I love red leaf maples at a spot out in the backyard here because I knew that I was going to build the pond to fit the Japanese maple. And eventually I digged around to build the pond, but the Japanese maple came first.
Nice.
nice.
That is true that like different points in your life, you have different trees. Like you just brought up the crabapple, which we have, but we had a mimosa tree and I love that tree. I would never call that a favorite tree, but it's like a Dr. Seuss tree. I mean, how can you forget?
Yeah.
My grandmother had one, and I have such memories of that tree because it was so different.
At certain exits on the Garden State Parkway up by me, they're on there and I've pulled over before trying to grab a seed from like getting off the exit. Yeah.
And Frank, your crab apples remind me, my parents' house had dogwood trees that were like the perfect size for me to climb as a kid. And I spent so much time sitting up in the dogwood tree. They're great memories, yeah.
Well, I used to do that because on Wednesday afternoons, we supposed to go to catechism, you know, religious training, right? And so I'd end up down at the park in the crabapple tree rather than going to the school.
It's a religious experience.
It was mine.
Yeah.
There you go.
How about you, Jason?
There is a very large old weeping willow that was my best friend in so much as it was just so gobsmackingly huge. We grew up in that tree as a family. And when we tore out a stairway renovating the house, my dad put the stairway up to the first branch, which was probably 2.5, 3 foot diameter as a branch. And as a 5-year-old kid, oh my gosh. And we just lived in that tree, and it hung out over a pond. And so in the wintertime, you know, you could be over the pond when the ice was thin and the ball or something would roll on the pond, and you could get an armful of rocks, stand on a branch, and there'd be 3 of us throwing stones trying to get the ball off the ice. It was just, you know, it was a huge tree, and it was my favorite tree because I could climb it and I could go to pretty high heights once I got to the first branch. And as a little kid, you know, you're not worried about the strength of wood. It was a great tree. But I do remember one time, the one kid, our neighbor, wound up, he threw the rock and he lost his balance, and he came out of the tree and he went through the ice, and it was like one of those tape things at a murder scene. Just he went right through the ice, and that picture of his body going through the ice. And we were a little bit nervous until he came up out of the ice, you know, but what a that's my favorite tree.
Nice.
And he's okay.
Oh, he's okay. He's okay. Hey, I fell out of that tree through the ice once or twice myself. I mean, it's just something you do as a kid, you know. At least in upstate New York, that's high entertainment. So, but yeah, that's Weeping Willow, this one particular tree, because it was just absolutely huge.
Yeah. And that's why trees are important. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for speaking to us. You know, we just want the Federation to know what kind of experience we have. And it's reassuring to know that you are both teaching students and that they're going to be coming up in the tree world and in the landscape world, and that they're learning from you.
I hope that there's better evidence than this.
No, they're getting good. They have good teachers.
Yes, we're all lucky to have you, and thanks for taking time out tonight to talk to us and to, you know, help the membership get to know who the board is and how much you guys bring to the table. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yes,
you.
you're welcome. Take care, folks.